Thank you very much. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome everybody to this webinar and to thank all concerned with its preparation. We're especially grateful to the audience for taking the time to participate in this important webinar and to our speakers. Just to set the scene, in the latest Global Burden of Neurological Disorders produced by the Institute of Health Metrics Evaluation Unit, migraine with stroke and Alzheimer's dementia form the dominant contributors to non-communicable diseases, particularly the neurological non-communicable diseases. These are the leading cause of disability and the second leading cause of mortality in the world. Another way of saying this is that migraine is one of the 3 brain disorders which make non-communicable disease the leading cause of disability worldwide. This World Brain Day that we're now in is the 5th that the World Federation of Neurology has held. Each time we partner with an organisation associated with a chosen topic of disease. Previous World Brain Days have been clean air and the environment, where we partnered with the Environmental Neurology Specialty Group, stroke, where we partnered with the World Stroke Organisation, epilepsy, where the partner has been the International League Against Epilepsy, and brain health and the aging brain. Now, in 2019, we're really proud to have been partnered by the International Headache Society. We're also very happy to have Yakety Yak as our media partners in this. This webinar will discuss why migraine, a non-fatal brain disorder, contributes so much to disability and how this is potentially remediable through education, access to improved treatments, and increased research. Let me welcome our speakers and our moderator. During the webinar, we'll hear from Dr. Elaine Jones, director of one of the directors of the American Academy of Neurology, Professor Tissa Wijeratne, chair of the World Federation of Neurology Publicity and Advocacy Committee, Professor Wolfgang Grisold, World Federation of Neurology General Secretary, Professor David Dodick, immediate past president of the International Headache Society, chair of the International Headache Society Global Patient Advocacy Coalition, and chair of the American Migraine Foundation. We'll also hear from patient advocate Audrey Craven from the Migraine Association of Ireland. Professor Lars Edvardsen is the current president of the International Headache Society, and he will act as the moderator of this webinar. Welcome, Lars.
Thank you, William. It is a great pleasure that we could join up for this important event. It carries a number of important issues, and one of them is that migraine is getting into the brain nowadays. It is a brain disease, and that is very important. As you can imagine, 50 years ago we went to the moon, and the moon has been there forever. As long as we can find documents from mankind, migraine has also been there forever. So at 50 years after this trip to the moon, we are now having migraine as a brain disease, and there's lots of things that have been happening. We will have a palette of important people telling us about it. My contribution as president of IHS, it has been very fortunate because during my presidency, the new medications have appeared, the CGRP blocking drugs, and that has made a change for many people. But it has also made a major change to neurologists worldwide, because now they have good tools to their patients, and that will help in making it a great neurological disease as it should stay. So thank you very much for this, for organizing this kind of thing. So now we move to the presenters, and as you were saying, we have next speaker, that is Elaine Jones, and she's a director from the American Academy of Neurology. And I visited this conference, and they're also moving. There are more and more presentations and companies being present at the AAN. And as well, I was recently at the European Academy of Neurology. It was spectacular to see a couple of thousand people listening to these presentations. So thank you very much. So Elaine, it's your time to present about the patient's misery, I would say.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us today. So I am a neurologist practicing in the United States. I'm a general neurologist. I'm also on the Board of Trustees of the American Academy of Neurology. And I'm going to speak a little bit about some of the impact of migraine and disability. Migraine affects men, women, and children around the world. And if you look at maps of the prevalence of migraine, there isn't a single country that is spared from this disease. While most common in females due to hormonal influences, it can certainly affect males and females from all socioeconomic classes, all races, and a wide range of ages from infancy to seniority. So migraine really does not discriminate. Everyone is at risk. There are clear measurable impacts from migraine that is on productivity. So it's very easy to measure these effects on productivity. The estimated proportion of time spent with migraine during the average person's life is 5.3% of their life. In the UK, it is estimated that there are 25 million days lost from work or school each year due to migraine. And in the United States, it's estimated that 157 million days are lost to migraine. So these numbers are impressive, but I think they are only part of the story. The full impact on people's lives is hard to estimate because we can't measure things like family events that are missed. So measuring missed days of school, family events that are missed, inability to do chores for basic living, all of these are impacted by migraine and are much harder to measure. Migraines can affect someone's mood, making them irritable and depressed. And adding to this, the guilt of having migraines and the effect it has on their loved ones and their lives can have significant disability for people. It affects relationships with spouses, children, and friends. So we also know there's a life cycle to migraine, and the migraine can actually start long before the headache and extend long after the headache. Hours to days before the headache starts, people can experience prodromal symptoms, which include fatigue, troubles concentrating, yawning, nausea, appetite changes. These same symptoms can occur during the postdrome phase after the headache ends. So the impact of the entire cycle can be days or even weeks out of a person's life. One study done in 2018 showed that 59% of respondents felt they would be better parents if they were living without migraine. The same study showed that nearly 58% of children said they would appreciate some help in dealing with the effects of their parents' migraines as well. So the total impact is huge, and we really can't measure this. We know it's a complex medical condition, and it can be debilitating for some and can impact the person's physical and emotional well-being and impact their families as well as relationships. So that's the bad news. The good news is that there is lots of things that are available to manage migraine. There are many things that can be done to prevent or to treat migraine and to cope with these impacts that migraine has on your life. This can range from lifestyle changes to medications, to talking with loved ones about migraine and its impact. And there is a lot of hope for migraine sufferers, and that's what you're going to hear in the rest of this presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. It's wonderful to hear this lecture from American Academy of Neurology, with a little sarcasm, though. So next speaker, that is Professor Tissa Vijayaramne, and he is Chair of the Public Awareness and Advocacy Committee of the World Federation of Neurology. And I got a link a few minutes ago where That was a report from down there, from the south, of your great achievements. So I congratulate you to that. But now we want to hear your views on the prevalence.
Thank you very much, Lars. This is an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time in entire human civilization history, we are seeing the academic firepower of academic medicine with almost about 400, 500 worth experience in this panel. So thank you all for the panelists, and thank you all for the attendees, which is 374 as I can see. I congratulate for joining us. Migraine is common. It is the most common brain disease affecting 1 in 7 people worldwide. If I were to talk about the story in Down Under, where myself, Professor Carroll and Richard Stark live, it is probably close to 1 in 4, 1 in 5. The latest the publication on numbers game, the GBD paper, which I had the privilege of being co-author, we realized that there are nearly 3 billion, with a letter B, as you can see, sufferers with a headache disorder in 2016 alone. This paper was published only a couple of months back. It showed that over 1 billion suffered from this pervasive, complex electrical and chemical disorder affecting migraine, as you heard from Elaine. I think it is important to know that we are dealing with a common disorder, commonest indeed. I told you that this is unprecedented time. It gives us a unique, wonderful opportunity to target this particular disorder and promote brain health worldwide. In fact, during last 24 hours, I have done 17 radio interviews right across Australia, some local, some national, and I had about 3 interviews, and we basically brainwash our community correctly about this pervasive disorder and created the massive wave of awareness campaign throughout Australia. So this can be done. The disappointing thing is it doesn't respect your religion or region. I come from Sri Lanka originally. I travel back and forth to Sri Lanka multiple times. In fact, I'm heading there to do a headache workshop in 2 days' time. And I see headache patients, complex migraine patients every time when I fly in and go and visit those places. It's the same story Australia also. I practice neurology in Melbourne, and every week I meet 4 to 5 patients with chronic migraine who have not had the diagnosis despite they live in one of the most livable cities. So it affects everybody across the board, from north to south, west to east, without having any respect or discrimination whatsoever to the region, race, or religion. It affects everyone across the globe. Remember, when you have 1 billion patients suffer from this complex neurological disorder that has been neglected for a long period of time, imagine their family members, imagine their partners, imagine their children, workmates. So it probably affects close to half of the world population. If I were to talk about access to care, I think I already alluded to the fact that irrespective of where you live, until we destigmatize this disorder and bring the respect that this particular disorder needs, access to care continue to vary across the board. It doesn't really matter whether the patient live in Mayo Clinic catchment area or Sydney or Melbourne or Vienna or London for that matter. Access may not be equal to all patients. In my experience and my reading, there is a huge room for improvement everywhere, from the resourceful countries to resource limited countries. Again, I like to remind the viewers that what we have created by combining massive organizations such as International Headache Society and World Federation of Neurology, we created this unique opportunity. The other thing that I have been learning over the last decade or so is it is very difficult to convince young medical students and young doctors to be interested in migraine. It has stigma. I think, again, the platform that we have created over the last couple of months and creating today is creating this unprecedented opportunity to fix the mess and get younger people on board. All of us in the panel today, we all have a shelf life. We may not be around for a long period of time. So we have to bring more younger people into this interesting disorder. When you have such a common disorder affecting brain, which is the most fascinating organ in the body, surely if you come to neurology, you shouldn't be doing anything else other than headache disorders and migraine. You would learn the neurology and neurosciences, migraine after migraine after migraine after migraine. I think this is an unprecedented time, and we should use this opportunity. Obviously, the World Brain Day migraine, painful truth, I believe, is a critically important turning point in entire human civilization history. Most of us gave our very best as a team to get this World Brain campaign as one of the best campaigns that we had thus far. And I think the point of change would continue to go strength from strength. And my final message to all of you is never lose hope. Let us be the strong as ever. Let's keep the World Brain Day momentum that we have been building up going from strength to strength. This World Brain Day is going to be different for all the World Brain Days that you had thus far. Our president and the committee and the trustees were keen to make sure that we continue to hammer the momentum that we build throughout the year to fix this mess. In my mind, this is something that we can fix 100%. There's nothing structurally wrong with this billion plus folks with migraine. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you very much for this important message, Disa. Yes, we realize, all of us, that it is underdiagnosed, undertreated, and our mission is really to dig out the patients and dig out the new medicines to help this vast number of people to a better life all around the globe. So thank you very much. Next is Bill Carroll from Australia. He is the president of the World Federation of Neurology and will be talking about research. So please, Bill, I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you, Lars. I'm back again, everyone, and I'm going to talk about how little migraine receives in terms of research, and I'll dwell also on the effects of that and what benefits we might expect if this was changed. So just to begin, migraine receives much less research funding than other disease sets. I've already talked about neurological non-communicable diseases, and the other two large groups in that area, in that topic, are Alzheimer's disease and stroke. So I thought it might be worthwhile just looking briefly at the relative amounts of money that are spent in those areas. So taking the figures from the National Institutes of Health for 2018 and those estimated for 2019, the differences are staggering. In 2018, migraine received $21 million in research funding from all the areas that the NIH could add up from and collect. And it's estimated to receive $31 million this year. Now, with regard to Alzheimer's disease for 2018, this represents just 1% of that which is estimated for Alzheimer's disease. And it's about the same percentage for this year. For stroke, the comparative figures for migraine are only very slightly better. For 2018, migraine research amount of sum of $21 million represents 6% of what's devoted to stroke and 9% of what's devoted to Alzheimer's disease. Still very, very much underfunded. Now, these figures surely indicate the relative underfunding of migraine research. And data shows a close correlation between the amount of money spent and the number of people engaged in research and the speed of progress. There's no doubt that in Alzheimer's disease and in stroke, things are moving faster than they are in migraine. It's not to say we haven't had some breakthroughs and some advances. but it's 30 years since we got worthwhile, useful acute treatments known as triptans. And now we're only just starting to get onto treatments which will stop migraine occurring, that is preventative or prophylactic medication. Molecules targeting the major messenger for migraine, calcium channel gene-related peptide, are likely to transform the lives of people suffering from migraine, and we'll hear some more about that a little later. As research brings increased understanding, there'll be more treatments that are easier to administer in order to reduce the disability caused by migraine. Without going into it much further, it's important to realize that you have to keep abreast with these developments and to access them if you want to be benefited by them. And patients need to consult their doctors who are experts in this area, particularly neurologists. They also need to vigorously advocate for increased research funding for migraine. Without that, I'm afraid in this world that we live in, you'll be left behind. You do have to get out there and fight for monies from governments for research. So I'd like to close my area of talking on research by just saying that we have got research, but we need a lot more of it, and we need a lot more funding for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. It is very true words. In my country, Sweden, a small country, 10 million people, we have the Swedish Research Council, and they have never given any money for migraine research. So we are a bad example there, but hopefully all this new research that has appeared and the new medications will be vehicles to increase this arena. Well, now we come to education, and Wolfgang Grisold, who is the Secretary General of the World Federation of Neurology, will tell us some about this. Please, Wolfgang.
Thank you very much, Lars, and thank you all panelists for being here and enabling us to make this first webinar in such an exciting scope. So I will speak on three brief topics. One is that migraine is under-recognized and underdiagnosed. The second one, that healthcare providers and patients need to understand more about migraine and educate themselves on migraine. And thirdly, patients must advocate for themselves, and we have to subsidize them. So migraine and headache are often not sufficiently regarded as an incapacitating illness. There may be various reasons, and one of them being that the subjective pain experience without visible signs for others and the transient nature makes it difficult for others to understand how difficult migraine can be. But as we know, migraine can severely affect the daily lives. The second point is patients are often not aware that effective diagnostics and effective treatments are available. Even well-educated patients often look for psychological or even psychiatric explanations for their migraine. And I was very surprised in talking about a few healthcare providers. The influence of psychological factors is much overestimated. Patients need to be aware that migraine is a periodic, incapacitating disease which needs a thorough neurological examination, and that research and available pharmacological treatments can improve their condition. Often, as I said, even healthcare providers, it is considered a minor character and the psychological aspects may be overemphasized. I just want to add that Sigmund Freud, who is believed to have been a migraine sufferer himself, which is based on the analysis of his work and on his letters. And he provided a psychodynamic explanation of migraine, which still has an influence today, and this is something we cannot neglect. The relation of patients with the neurologists and other healthcare providers are changing, and increasingly from the paternalistic view, from autonomy, reciprocity is the basis of communication. Patients, in this case migraineurs, do not only receive information and diagnosis from the doctors, but have many new ways of communication. Depending on the region of the world, specialists need to provide tools of self-education for patients, helping patients to find access to the medically updated and serious information. And this is my final word. This is advocacy. Advocacy means advocare, to speak for the cause, and this can be directed for a person, for a cause, or a procedure. It can be self-advocacy, and it is very closely linked with empowerment of patients, which often enables and encourages patients to seek and look for their own personal way and strategy. The World Federation of Neurology advocates in a macro style for neurologic societies, and we hope that neurologic societies will be inspired by us to promote and bring the new information to individuals, and break news and bring educational tools to patients. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wolfgang. This is important tasks for all of us. I mean, migraine is huge, and there are so many patients, and they affect not only themselves but also their next of kin. So in some ways, almost half of the population in the world are affected one or the other way. So it's important, as you said, with spreading the words. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Dave Dodick, and he is a past president to the IHS, just before me, and he is also chair of the American Migraine Foundation and chair of the IHS-GPAC initiative. He will be speaking about how to treat the patients in the best way, and standard of care is a topic. Please, David.
Thank you very much, Lars, and thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank Dr. Carroll and Dr. Grisold and Dr. Wijaratne for their partnership, their leadership, and for their commitment to dedicating World Brain Day to migraine. It's huge for the field, and it's huge for patients. My colleagues have shared the painful truth about migraine and some very sobering statistics about the prevalence and the pervasive impact of migraine, the fact that it sits on the bottom rung of the research ladder, and the fact that it's underdiagnosed and undertreated. Well, having been in this field for 25 years plus, I believe there's never been before a time to be more hopeful that we can change all of that. And this World Brain Day is really symbolic of that moment in time that we find ourselves in. I truly believe that we are at the most crucial and opportune time in history, actually, to accomplish what I see as two very important tasks. The first is to establish migraine and other headache disorders as the public health priority that they represent, and ensure that all people who are impacted receive optimal care. The second is to advance knowledge through research, to develop not only more effective treatments, but to be able someday to select the treatment that is right for each patient, and someday develop cures, I believe, for individual patients or individual subgroups. My reason for such optimism is really the emergence of two major and really unprecedented and very ambitious initiatives that I believe will propel us toward these lofty but achievable goals. The first one of these most ambitious efforts is the International Research Coalition that's been developed. It's a patient registry, actually, where more than 1,000 characteristics of each person with migraine and other headache disorders, along with the blood sample for genetic and other types of analyses, brain imaging studies such as MRI scans, and a daily diary assessment on patients will be collected over a prolonged period of time. That will create a massive database that can be built to be mined by advanced analytical tools, and that this rich resource for research will be made available to researchers all over the world. What this will do, I believe, is it will rapidly and dramatically advance our understanding of migraine and other headache disorders. It will identify new targets for new treatments. And I think it will usher in an era of personalized medicine for each patient by identifying the factors that predict the future of an individual patient's headache disorder, as well as identify the treatment that is right for them. The second ambitious initiative, I think, is the development of the International Headache Society's Global Patient Advocacy Coalition, or GPAC. This was started by the International Headache Society back in 2017, and it brought together members of more than 40 of the leading headache, neurology, pain, and medical societies, including the World Federation of Neurology, the World Health Organization, individual patients, like Audrey Craven here with us today, patient advocates, patient advocacy organizations, pharmaceutical and device manufacturers, and regulatory agencies. So it's a very large coalition. And the goal of this initiative is to promote the global, regional, and local interests of people with recurrent headache disorders by first destigmatizing migraine and other headache disorders among policymakers, the general public, healthcare professionals, and bring in understanding and respect for these disorders and those who are impacted. The second goal of this coalition is to ensure that all patients with migraine and other headache disorders have access to competent and affordable medical care. They receive an accurate diagnosis, and they receive the standard of care with evidence-based treatments. This will involve education, not only of established healthcare providers, but I think the mandatory inclusion of headache education at all levels of the medical education system, including medical school and postgraduate training programs. The third mission of this coalition is to advocate for increased funding for research. As you've heard, there's a dearth of it up to this point. And finally, advocating for improvements in the workplace and in the school environment for people, including children and adolescents who are impacted by migraine and other headache disorders. The International Headache Society's GPAC will accomplish these goals through the experience, the expertise, the influence, and the tools that have already been developed by the many organizations involved in this collaborative effort. But, and this is where all of the patients come in, we can only have a global reach by working alongside local champions, most importantly, the patients. We need patients to mobilize and work together with us. As we say within our public awareness campaign within the American Migraine Foundation, we need to be as relentless as migraine, and when we stand together, nobody stands alone. Patients must advocate for themselves at every level, with their friends and families, with teachers and employers, with public officials, and with their healthcare providers. The days of feeling intimidated, stigmatized, marginalized, and unworthy of support and proper medical attention are over. And I hope today's webinar and this historic and unprecedented opportunity through World Brain Day ignites a spark in you to be a part of the solution and gives you hope, because I have never been filled with more hope in my career for people with migraine and the patients that I serve. And thank you so much for your time and for this opportunity.
Thank you, David. I totally agree that we should gather all powers and all efforts that we have to make it better for our patients on all aspects. So your initiative with the GPAC is enormously important. Thank you. Another light on this scene, I think David is a light beacon here. That is Audrey Craven, of course. And I have met her many times, and she has been, in the beginning, a lonely soldier and advocating for the patients at different scenes. She made a tremendous contribution to organize the European Migraine and Headache Alliance, and also worked relentlessly on Ireland to form the Irish Patient Organization. So I've admired all your work, Audrey. So let's hear from you about the awareness. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a privilege to be in the company of so many eminent people dedicating their lives to improve the quality of life for those of us who've lived and continue to bear the burden. Thank you so much. And thank you to the World Federation, particularly for making this day possible. I've lived with migraine all my life, and my daughter has inherited it from me. So I would see awareness and education as being two sides of the same coin. Every time we hold an awareness event, we are also educating. So by educating, we can do this in many, many ways, in formal lectures, in webinars like this, or most importantly, I think, the testimony from the patient. All over the world, people tell each other stories. But if we tell it in a particularly strategic way, getting across our key messages, and David mentioned his work and his leadership indeed with GPAC. And this is, as has been said by previous speakers, Tessa, Bill, Elaine, Lars, Wolfgang. This is an unprecedented time. I'm 25 years a patient advocate, and probably, Lars, you know me that length of time. It's been a very lonely place, but there are millions around the world who are in a very lonely place as we speak, because migraine is so isolating and you feel you are alone. So this opportunity to reach out to them through social media, through various digital platforms, and to give them the hope that all of you have expressed this afternoon, and whatever time of the world it is where you are. There are new things. There is, of course, a lot coming down the track. I want to refer to the research and the importance of patients being involved in that and in helping to provide real world evidence. We need to do that. We need to do that in a structured way, and we need to have the capacity to do that. We also need to make careers for brilliant young scientists. And Lars, your work has meant so much to my world, because of course it gives us tremendous hope for the future. So we need to make careers. We need the best brains in the world, and as Tissa has said, get them interested. The brain is the most fascinating organ, but we as patients who live with the disorder and who have bear the burden, and the burden is determined by the severity and the frequency of attacks. It's a bit like a power cut. I get migraine where I can function some days, and others where I simply have to withdraw. So in the workplace, which will be one of the main projects of GPAC, if you are at your workstation and you can withdraw for a couple of hours, and conditions and the climate and the opportunity is within your company to withdraw, you can then return to your workstation as an effective member of staff. And that gives everybody an opportunity to live with migraine, but also to make sure that we're not stigmatized. So I would say that as we work through in terms of education and awareness, in terms of leadership to the community, because we have to make sure that all the undiagnosed are reached, all those who believe there is nothing they can do, that this is something that they have to put up with in their lives. And we know, and I was so pleased that the psychological aspect was raised in this webinar, because as you said, Wolfgang, very often that can be regarded as the only coat peg upon which to hang it. And we know that it is a brain disorder. So all our work has to be focused on recognition, awareness, and never ever losing hope. And the registry that is being created will be a vital tool as we go forward. In terms of reducing stigma, as we run events, we have to do so nationally. We have to think globally and act nationally. And this movement that, David, I think you have been at the forefront of, is happening now. And things are changing. It is a wonderful time in our history to reach out to all those to show that migraine is common, it's disabling, it's treatable, and I would say more than anything else, it's manageable. But we have to be partnering with you, our healthcare providers, our scientific community, and we also have to partner with key people. For instance, politicians particularly will take up our cause if we come solution-based. They get so many problems on their desks. Here in Ireland, we've been able to get some changes because migraine has now been recognised in our society and in our country. So a clinical care programme is going to be implemented. That would not have happened without collaborating and partnering with key people. So we need the data, as has already been said. We need the goodwill. We need to be solution focused. We need to make our politicians look good. This is something you can do that will change people's lives and will keep people living in the community. The World Health Organization talks about participation in the community. We heard from Elaine about the reduced productivity and work days lost. We know that's a very good economic argument, but I would say the painful truth is that this can be managed. It can be body, mind, and spirit, not just the medical model. We need to look at the whole person, and we need to have patient empowerment, working in very close collaboration with our healthcare provider. And I'm so excited about the prospects ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Wonderful. Now we have 10 minutes left for some of the questions that have been sent to this webinar, and Tisa and myself will give our colleagues here a few questions at our choice, just as examples, and perhaps afterwards some of these questions can be responded via email or so. It's difficult to make any particular choices, so I will do it from my heart, and then you can continue, Tisa. David, the long-term effects of the antibodies, and perhaps also how will the opioids be involved? These are two areas I'm thinking a little bit around. Please, if you...
Thank you, Lars. Yeah, you know, the emergence of this new class of antibody is exciting for patients and certainly exciting for clinicians. And of course, when you're dealt with a new class of medication that you've never used before, you first of all worry about side effects that didn't materialize in the clinical trials. And secondly, you worry and you're concerned about the long-term effects of these drugs over time. It takes time to get experience. And in the United States, for example, over 250,000 people have been treated with this new class of antibodies. And so far, there doesn't appear to be any sort of serious adverse events that have occurred. There has also been some experience now with a couple of the antibodies, one in particular where, 5 years out, in a smallish group of patients who have been exposed to an antibody for up to 5 years, the side effect profile and the adverse events that have occurred don't appear to be appreciably different from what occurred in clinical trials. So it's still early days, but we know a lot more now, 1 year after these antibodies have been approved, than we knew certainly a year ago. And so far, I'm cautiously optimistic that there don't appear to be any sort of serious long-term adverse events, at least given what we know right now. But again, it is early days, and time will tell as more and more patients get exposed for longer and longer periods of time. In regards to the opioid issue, I think everybody knows the sort of opioid epidemic and the opioid crisis we're dealing with in the United States. It's a serious issue, to be sure. And when it comes to migraine, unfortunately, recent studies have indicated that up to a third, maybe over 40% of patients are still being treated with opioids. And there's really no reason for that, because there's very little evidence that opioids are effective for the treatment of migraine. We know about their habituation, addictive potential, and taking as few as 8 or 6 tablets of an opioid per month significantly increases the risk of medication overuse headache. And so it may be short-term gain for very long-term pain. So I don't believe there's any role for the use of opioids in the acute or in the prophylactic treatment of migraine, because I think it makes the situation worse over time. And we have so many other very good evidence-based therapies with which to manage our patients.
Thank you.
I will ask the second question. I'm going to ask this question to both the Professor Carroll and Professor Edwinson. I'm going to summarize this question. We now have this unprecedented opportunity where we establish a nice marriage between International Headache Society and World Federation Neurology on the World Brain Day Migraine Painful Truth. Obviously, we know that education and access is key to promote better migraine care across the world. So I'm going to give each one of you maybe 2 minutes each to respond. How can we establish this marriage to continue a bit more long term and collaborate each others and offer education and access across the board for neurologists, emergency rooms, and primary care physicians, so that patients can get educated healthcare providers across the board. Professor Carroll, if you respond to this question first.
Thanks, Tessa. It's a very good question. One which we would, in the World Federation of Neurology, like to see happen anyway. But it boils down to a willingness to continue a partnership where we both see mutual benefit. Now, the World Federation of Neurology has at its core the importance of brain health in general. And there are lots of diseases in neurology, but migraine is one in which we thought there was perfect justification to be involved in before we had the opportunity to partner with the International Headache Society. And those reasons have come out during this webinar, but most importantly, there's a need. And the need is primarily education about the condition, education about what can be done about it, education about who are the best people to have the to provide the treatment, and education in terms of what's being done in future further research. And we've heard from David about this important, if you like, resource, the registry, which will be able to be mined and examined and studied for a long time into the future, which will maybe provide the goal of personal treatment for each individual migraineur. But more importantly, on the physician side of it, we have to work together so that our members, that is the world neurologists, need to know more about migraine as well. And so this is one way in which we can help spread the word about migraine that is not so much out in the general public, but amongst our large body of neurologists. And that's one of the reasons why just for this year, during this World Brain Day, we've worked to extend the World Brain Day message on migraine out to the World Congress of Neurology, so that there will be exposure at that important meeting where there'll be thousands of neurologists about the advances in migraine and what's needed to be done.
Thank you very much. Professor Edwinson.
I share your view, Bill. It's important to spread the word, and the members of the International Headache Society, they are mostly neurologists, but they have a special interest in headache disorders. So it's kind of, you can say, the shared population of physicians. How to make these educations? I know we have been a bit relaxed on updating our own home pages and our own materials, but we are going to rectify this the next few years. That's one of the legacies I'm thinking of. And of course, we can partner in these kind of events to target, I say, mainly the professionals. When it comes to the patients, I think the patient organizations should take a big lead in that, and we can of course help them, but it's important, I think, from my knowledge of politicians, that we have the professionals on one hand and the lay people, patients on the other hand, because if we mix them, we are suspected of taking hostages. That's the message I get from the politicians I speak with. So I will help and partner with the WFN as much as I can, and I'll support this as much as I can.
Could I also make a proposal to both of you? I'm a member of International Headache Society also, of course. We do have a headache medicine curriculum that was designed by Education Committee 2009. Last, correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think we could perhaps relook at it and update it, and then maybe come up with a combined curriculum that is endorsed and supported by both organizations, and then promote youngsters and old folks to work around that and promote education? Is that something practically feasible from WFN point of view, Bill, and from IHS point of view, Prof. Edwinson?
It's certainly.
Yeah. We can speak
my
it
answer
with
is very short.
Yeah.
My answer is very short on this. I think it's a very good idea, but we would act primarily on the advice of the International Headache Society, because they are the experts in migraine. Even though they are neurologists like the rest of the bulk of our membership, they are the experts in this area.
I think it's a very good suggestion, Tissa. We have an education committee, so I would have to work via them. I cannot work over them, but I think we can take it up, make the proper discussions, and support that this is done. And if we have such an important partner as the WFN, it makes this process more easy. And I'm burning for this issue. It is important that we have good curriculum and so on. So
before I finish off this question, sorry, Lars, do you have anything else to say also before I move on to the last part of the question?
No, please keep on.
I think I kept Audrey behind. What I learned by organizing first National Migraine Walk in Australia is how powerful patient voice is. I put 400 plus Melbourneian to street yesterday, and it was a resounding success. I think to get youngsters and neurologists more educated, patient power and patient empowerment is critically important. And also educating patients how to get the best out of doctors is also equally important. I would like to hear from Audrey, maybe spending about a minute or so stressing how critically important our patients to know how they get best out of neurologists and their primary care physicians, despite they may not have been to a medical school.
She's evidently muted.
Audrey, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very well. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Tissa. I liked what you said earlier about this being a turning point. And I really believe it is a turning point. And how can we do that? So, as you said, patients can be very powerful. We also have to be upskilled sufficiently to have the capacity to make representation in a strategic way. And for that, we need the data. So that's vital, and that's been well discussed here in this webinar. We are seen as the trusted third party. And I think, Lars, you referred to how politicians perceive vested interests. So I think by working in a partnership, in a mutually respectful way, we can have this turning point that we all know has come our way, but we have to seize it very, very carefully and with great respect, but with great excitement to move forward. So I think also I want to say the peer-to-peer support is hugely important, and I'm sure all those Melburnians who approached you and with whom you came in contact with yesterday, Tissa, would see this as being a guiding light, as somebody understanding a disorder that they have always thought was only a headache. We would say migraine, not just another headache. And as we've heard during this webinar, a very complex, but as individual as a thumbprint. But together, we can actually move forward. And I truly believe, and I want to exhort you all to continue your work, because when you're in the darkened room, if you only knew how much each of you mean to us, if you only knew, I feel so much the responsibility of every patient who can't speak here today. So the world belongs to those who give the next generation hope. Thank you.
Lars, you can handle the next question now.
Well, I don't think how long we can keep on. It's 5 minutes past. So is it not time for Bill to give the last words?
Dr. Evanson, I think that we can go ahead and answer a few more questions and then
okay.
maybe another 5 minutes,
okay.
Since we got a little bit of a late start.
Yep, okay.
Ashley's determined to keep me up beyond 1 o'clock, it seems. Go ahead.
Yep. So Wolfgang, it's how do you see the major education issues?
Well, thank you very much, Lars. I think there are many, many aspects to education, and what I see now that there is not so much about, maybe in the English-speaking world, I think we should encourage societies to make laypersons educational programs for migraine. The problem is, of course, what kind of medium you use. And the other problem is that we have is the half-time, the half-life, because once you publish something, you spend a lot of time in developing an educational program, it's outdated already. So one has to have force, let's say, as the medium, probably use electronics, of course, and also have a system of updating things. I think one good example would be the so-called type of M-learning. M-learning means like mobile learning. It has been shown that in the countries which have not enough computers or access, they still have smartphones, like in Africa, and you could use some of these M-learning techniques to update people on migraine. But definitely regular updating, brisk messages, and also help people to find their way from this abundant information they receive in the internet, where most of it is useless. So we have to build a credit for a good education that's trustworthy and where we can publish reliable things. Thank you.
So you mean some way of accreditation that this is fine. But the problem is perhaps twofold. Otherwise, I mean, we sit here, we have our native languages, and how should we translate? Most in Africa and Asia, they don't speak English or and so on. So this is also how can we have to create shorter messages, shorter forms, very slim things for the ordinary doctor and also patients.
Yes, maybe we should also kind of consult people to bring us help with brisk messages, with the use of graphics, and helping us that. I mean, of course, we cannot tackle all languages, but I mean, for Africa, there are some main language like English, French, Portuguese. This would help a lot, I think. But as we have, the World Federation has 120 members, I think the encouragement to make their own, build their own, and work on their own educational tools would be a good thing that we could look into. Thank you.
Yes, that was another spontaneous thought coming up to me here. You mentioned Sigmund Freud, and there was another German-speaking writer, Nietzsche, and he wrote in one of his books that, I mean, I'm thinking of, there must be some benefit of having migraine. It's not only bad things. And he said that, well, when he was creating new thoughts, he could do that when he was having his migraine attacks. The important thing was to write down these good new words. There must be some positivity.
You must be a believer in Nietzsche or not, but I think if you look at Sigmund Freud, I think he really made an impact. And if you look at recent literature, even a few years ago, there's still a big discussion about the psychodynamics that somehow may lead to migraine. And I think this is something we have to be aware of, and we have to, I don't want to use the word fight, but we have to convince that it's a brain disease.
Yeah, of course. So, any last words from any of you? Otherwise,
I think can I just add that the theme of today, the painful truth, is an opportunity, as we said earlier, to open the conversation and to look for some solutions. And I hope that I certainly believe we've done that in this session. So we know it's painful, but we also know that there is real hope for a better quality of life.
And what I learned from Australia during just last 3 weeks is how powerful patient voice is. Not only we put 400 patients in, we established a new advocacy organization called Migraine Foundation Australia, just on the basis of voice from patients. And there's a very high chance that a federal politician in Canberra would talk about migraine during her maiden speech. Not confirmed, but there's a very high possibility. This is all coming from patient voice. I think if we have the desire, if we have such powerful backing from organizations such as World Federation Neurology, International Headache Society, if we promote education and advocacy, if we have people like David Dodick, Lars Edwinson, Wolfgang, mentoring all this younger crowd, we can take this whole world and promote better brain health beyond migraine. I think I'm delighted that Professor Carroll was determined to run this World Brain Day campaign longer than just a day. So I'm super excited. It is close to 1:15 in Australia now, but I'm energized as if I just woke up.
That's I can talk for myself, Tisa, but I strongly support your idea. And of course, if we can get new patient advocacy groups in each country, that will really put a high pressure on the politicians and on the research. So,
totally agree.
Yeah. Last word, Bill.
Thanks, Lars, and thank you to all of those who spoke this evening. But more importantly, thank you to all of those who joined this webinar, either live or remotely, and especially to those who did pose questions and we may not have directed our answers to them specifically. Migraine is such a huge area, and almost everybody's experience is quite often different. So to get an answer across in a webinar is very difficult, that an answer that suits an individual. But in terms of generalities, I think that this has been a really important event. It's, in my view, a really successful event in the struggle to have migraine confronted, to have some of the facts about it exposed, its effective treatment aired, giving hope to everybody now that we have a way of dealing with this condition. And I must say, at the same time, everyone has helped raise the importance of brain health generally. It's a trite saying to say there is no health without brain health, but it's very true. A final note about the World Brain Day. as Tissa mentioned, we were very keen to have this extended, and we're delighted that the International Headache Society felt the same way, and that we will probably get close to ending this particular campaign at the end of October at the World Congress of Neurology in Dubai. But this has been a very useful exercise for us. It fits with our core mission, and we're very grateful to have partnered with the International Headache Society and Audrey and the AAN. So it's been really, really a very good exercise. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
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 Have a great World Brain Day campaign.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all. Great.
Bye, David. Bye, Wolfgang.